So officially, a warm good afternoon to all of you. I think I'm audible, Betsy.
Yes, you are.
Yes, okay, thank you. So a warm good afternoon to all of you. Myself, Miss Nima, will be your host for today's session. So this is the ninth lecture for season 5 of Chrysalis for the academic year 2025-26. A warm welcome to all the esteemed guests of today's program. And I would first like to welcome Dr. Dias Edi, Principal, Professor Betsy Palsy, Director of Research, HOD, Susan Joshi, our former principals, Professor Chako Jospi, Dr. Shyama Shashidran, today's presenter, and Dr. Nisha Tomji Verghese, our moderator. And I also welcome all the participants on behalf of Chrysalis team to today's session. With all the blessings from the Almighty, we are here to enrich you with another informative session. Chrysalis endeavor to celebrate academic legacy and foster intellectual exchange. Starting from humble in-house lecture sessions in November 2021 to pay homage to former teachers of our department, Reverend Father Anthony Kutikat CMI, Dr. Danya Menon, and Professor Paul Davis, the lecture series has emerged into a dynamic platform for researchers spanning from distinguished professors to emerging scholars who reaffirm the relevance of literary studies and the humanities in an increasingly automated world. So today we proudly invite our speaker, Dr. Shama Shashindran, who is an assistant professor of English from St. Thomas College, Thrissur. She's an academic speaker and a regular columnist in Malala Panorama, known for her insightful writings on education, culture, and contemporary life. With expertise in teaching, research, and public speaking, she bridges the world of academia and public discourse with clarity and conviction. So I welcome you, ma'am, to the Chrysalis program.
Thank you so much,
Now
Neha.
we also have Thank you, ma'am. Now we also have with us Dr. Nisha Tomchi Verghese, Associate Professor and HOD, Department of English, St. Albert's College, Autonomous Kochi. Dr. Nisha Tomchi Verghese is an Associate Professor of English. Sorry. She has served as the head of the department, Dean of Quality Assurance, NSS Program Officer, and Deputy Controller of Examinations. Her academic research engages with gender studies, post-colonial discourse, and representation of marginalized voices in literature. She has published widely in peer-reviewed journals, including Journal of Emerging Technologies and Innovative Research, International Journal of Research and Analytical Reviews, Turkish Online Journal of Qualitative Inquiry, and International Journal of Research and Scientific Innovation. She is also the co-author of the textbook Victorian Vista and Imperial Imaginings. So I welcome you, ma'am, and now it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Nima. Thank you for that warm words, for those warm words of welcome. And actually, I'm really honored to be here today, and I want to take this opportunity to thank Betsy ma'am for calling me, for inviting me for this session. And I was actually very much intrigued by the name Chrysalis because Chrysalis, as the name suggests, it symbolizes transformation. It's kind of a movement from one stage of intellectual growth to another. And I'm really happy that I was just talking to her before we started off formally. So I've just heard from her that this is a platform which brings together so many distinguished people, academicians, scholars, critical thinking. So I feel that this platform actually reaffirms the enduring relevance of literary studies, because we are living in a very automated and digitized world today. So I think this is a very relevant platform today, and it also reminds us that this. This literature is not something, it's not just an aesthetic expression. It is actually a means, a very powerful medium for shaping ethical and social consciousness. So I'm really happy to be here today. And today we have a very distinguished speaker with us, Dr. Shyama Shashidharan from St. Thomas College, Thrissur. And I was really intrigued by the topic that was suggested and that was given, from national narratives to transnational imaginaries, children's literature in transition. So, children's literature is actually something which moves me. I think it moves a lot of people. It is something that tugs at our heart, because I feel that over the years, children's literature has played a very important dynamic role in shaping cultural identity, social consciousness. So I feel that children's literature has functioned as a vehicle for transmitting national values. It helps to preserve collective memory. It reinforces moral framework because we understand, like through folklores, folk stories, historical tales, culturally specific narrative, children have been always introduced to a shared sense of belonging and national identity. But today we live in a world which is more connected than ever before. Today we have migration, we have digital media, we have global communication. So all these have actually changed or transformed the way children experience life. So, as a result of this, I feel children's literature is also evolving, and I don't think stories are today limited to a single country or culture. They are stories that cross borders. They reflect multiple identities, multiple languages, different experiences. So I think most of the books today, children's books or children's literature, they would explore themes such as migration, multiculturalism, environmental awareness, global citizenship. So, because today the present children that we see, or the today's generation, Gen Z or whatever is there, the youngsters, they are very diverse and very dynamic. They are not fixed or uniform. So today we imagine the child reader not just as a national subject, but as a person part of a wider global community. This is my understanding of this, and I'm really waiting to listen to Dr. Shyam. I'm so interested and so excited to listen to her because for me, I believe that this kind of shift from national to multinational, it actually raises some kind of important questions like, how can we balance local culture with global perspectives? What happens to national identity when stories include a lot of multicultural voices? How do today's narratives shape the way young readers understand themselves and the world around them? So these are some questions that are in my mind, and I'm sure Dr. Shyama will guide us through these transitions, and maybe she has a different perspective also to share and help us reflect on the cultural, social, the educational implications of children's literature in this rapidly evolving digitized world. So over to you, Dr. Sharma. Really excited and welcoming one and all. And I hope all of us will listen intently and pose our questions to her because this is going to be a very interesting dialogue. So over to you, Dr. Sharma.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Good evening to all. First of all, my heartfelt gratitude to Principal of St. Lucia's College, Dr. Diacidi, Professor Dr. Betsy Paul, and Dr. Nisha Thamji. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. Now, online sessions are one of the hardest. I don't think I'm an old one in this case because it feels like it more like a new generation Dora the Explorer, always asking for validation. Am I audible? Is my screen visible? And so it's one of the hardest for me. Or it more, feels like reading Ramayana to the dead because we are not sure whether the person next to us is spiritually awakened or not. We are not sure whether they are there or not. So it's really hard. I understand the difficulties. So I'll try to make it more sane, comprehensible, and compact. For that reason, I'm focusing today more on the framework instead of delving into the textual evidences I'll tell you why. Because from my limited experience and observation, when we delve too much into primary text, it's highly possible that the audience are not much aware about those primary texts because children's it's not still even in this 21st century children's literature belongs to children, and adults are not really familiar with. I'm not underestimating, but this is from my personal experience. So I'll stick on to the framework. At the same time, I'll tell you which works and all that. Okay, let me move on to the presentation. My മുൻകൂർ ജാമ്യം അതായത് എന്തൊക്കെ ഗ്ലിച്ചാണ് വരിക എന്ന് പറയാൻ പറ്റില്ല. So let me do that.
Yes,
Is my
Rama,
screen
it's not,
visible?
yeah, now it's visible.
Yeah, it's visible, right? Thank God. I'm always, worried about this presentation and all when it comes to online sessions. Yeah. Yeah. So this is the title. From national narratives to transnational imaginaries, children's literature in transition. So when we look at this title, we can see four major aspects here: national narratives, transnational imaginaries, children's literature, and transition, right? To reflect on this theme, it is important to first break down its key components. That is children's literature, then we have national narratives, transnational imaginaries, and transition. Stories about migration, diaspora, multicultural identities, and global belonging, as Nisha ma'am already said. These stories challenge the idea that identity must be tied to a single nation. For example, in India, recent laws and debates such as Citizenship Amendment Act and discussion around citizenship, migration, and national belonging have intensified nationalist sentiments and raised questions about who belongs to the nation and who does not. In this context, children's literature that celebrates migrant and hybrid identities may appear to resist dominant nationalist expectations. So, this creates a tension between nationalist narratives that demand singular loyalty and transnational narratives that promote inclusive and plural identities. Understanding how children's literature negotiates this tension in contemporary times form the core research problem. So, on one hand, we have transnationalist narrative, which is emerging in the 21st century. And on the other hand, we have nationalist narrative because both of this transnationalism and nationalism are more like, a simultaneous movement. On one hand, we have growing nationalism, and on the other hand, we have writers adopting this transnationalist narratives or transnational approach. So there is a conflict between transnational narrative, which is against this hegemonic nationalist expectations, and the nationalist narrative, which is promoting this nationalist political ideologies and all that. So this is the problematization here. So it leads to the quintessential question: should stories, particularly for children, promote a single national identity, or should they celebrate global, hybrid, and inclusive identities? So this is the problem here. And all this relevant CA debate, one nation, one language, Trump's travel ban and border wall, all this leads to this conflict between transnationalist narrative and nationalist narrative. So when writers adopt transnationalism as an approach in their work, particularly for children, what is happening? They are swimming against the current of nationalism, isn't it? Everybody wants to imbue nationalist ideologies into the minds of younger generation. That's their way of survival. So when writers depict transnationalist narrative or they depict hybrid identities, they are creating a resistance or counter discourse against nationalism. So the central framework of the study is that transnationalism, which can be seen both as an extension of and a challenge to nationalism, while nationalism in children's literature often foregrounds, nation building, identity formation, cultural cohesion, and transnationalism foregrounds mobility, border crossing, diaspora, hybridity, and global interconnectedness. Thus, transnationalism does not simply replace nationalism, it negotiates with, resists its limitations, and reimagines identity beyond fixed national boundaries. So, the study argues that children's literature is currently in a phase of transition from predominantly national narratives to transnational imaginaries. This transition is significant because contemporary children are growing up in a globalized world shaped by migration, digital media, multicultural interactions, and global political and cultural flows. As a result, literary representations of childhood are also shifting from singular nation centric identities to more fluid, hybrid, and cosmopolitan identities. So, see, is there a problem with imbuing nationalism in children's literature, or is it problematic? This is a question, right? Now, this is particularly the context of, India. If we give keywords like Australia, Canada, you'll get plenty of articles related to this imbuing of extreme nationalism in children's literature. Why? Because children's literature is always seen as a tool to construct national ideologies or to construct nation or to construct nationalism. So, what's the problem with infusing extreme nationalism in children's literature, particularly in this global age or in this transnational era? Because it's mainly, it creates a kind of rift between us and them in children. Margaret Meek, a critic, in her work Nationalism in Children's Literature, she asserts that she actually wonders at what age these kids identify themselves as like British or French or Canadian or Indian. At what age kids understand this bifurcations or the segregation? And she says that it's from the discourse, particularly the children's literature or the media they consume. They understand this segregation, or these contents actually reinforce their national identity. So we are moving back to the aspects. Okay, so we identified the research problem. Now we are moving to children's literature. I'm not going to explain the norms and propositions related to children's literature because we already know. But let me focus on the current status of children's literature. So, children's literature is often characterized as innocent, inept, and lacking the gravity found in works intended for adult audience. So, what will happen? Most of the time, adults are not really bothered about the content in children's literature because we always think that it's very simple and it's very naive. Nothing is going to, affect these kids. Words can't affect these kids because it's simple stories of animals or simple stories of some kids. So we kind of overlook children's literature even today. If we look at the research studies related to children's literature, there is a major gap. So that stigma of simplicity, often critics overlook children's literature. And this perception of simplicity stems from the belief that children themselves are inexperienced and unsophisticated. The idea of being straightforward and crude stigmatizes genres and subgenres of children's literature. Citing the examples of Dickens, Hardy, Joyce, and Woolf, and of course Thackeray, Peter Hunt, the critic, points out that an exhaustive search for their critical works reveals no mention of for their, of children. That is, the works of Dickens. If we look at works of Dickens, Hardy, Joyce, Woolf, or Thackeray, they have written for children. Hmm? But no source would acknowledge their works for children. It is all almost in oblivion. Nobody is bothered about their works for children because of this stigma. Because we commonly think that children's literature is very simple and naive, and it's for young amateur audience. Uh, this points to the fact that children's literature is seen as marginal to literary studies. The prevailing inclination to perceive literature for children as trivial and not so complex is still a deeply entrenched notion in academia and in the literary realm. It is crucial for scholars and educators to challenge this perception and recognize the value and complexity of children's literature. Another critic, Carrie Hines. Carrie Hines in the work Children's Literature, which was published in 2020, explores this same stigma. So Peter Hunt wrote this work in 1970s or 80s. Carrie Hines in 2020 in the work Children's Literature is exploring the same stigma, which means things haven't changed much. We still perceive children's literature as inept and lacking the gravity. So explores the stigma of triviality associated with children's literature and the marginalized status of this field. It's still marginalized. A dominant perspective within literary scholarship has traditionally positioned children's literature as embodying purity, simplicity, and entertainment value. This belief, deeply ingrained in our understanding of children's literature, is encapsulated in the assertion that children's literature is anything with shorter, simple structure. Works with shorter, simple structures are children's literature. This is a kind of sarcastic definition given by Hines. Anything simple and anything shorter is regarded as children's literature. And in the same manner, if you see any for example, look at the textbooks we provide to children. We give them very short and very simple, passage and all, even without looking at their age and age appropriateness and all, because we commonly have this perception that shorter and simple things equal to children's literature, or anything which pivots around children's literature is shorter and simple. So this statement highlights the circunal definitional construct inherent to concept of children's literature and underscores the pervasive nature of this conviction. The stigma of simplicity and lack of depth associated with children's literature extend to most genres and subgenres. And this stigma is the reason for all this. Most of the teachers, critics, parents, or whoever guide children are not able to see this latent imbuing of ideology in children's literature or even in children's textbooks. Think about the latest controversies we have seen in past few years regarding the content in children's textbooks, how the political communities or political parties try to imbue different, their own benefits through adding, very I can't say inappropriate, but very biased contents into textbooks. It happens because we overlook this complete area. Now we'll move on to the next aspect, nationalism. Okay, nationalism in children's literature. So before that, we should understand the fact that beyond the whimsy of being children's literature being very simple and naive, today contemporary children's literature is tackling tough issues. They are projecting issues related to migration. They are projecting issues related to revisionist histories, and they are trying their best to build emotional intelligence and also trying to incorporate universal human experiences. So this is a reality beyond the whimsy of simplicity and naive and all. Now, let's look into the aspect of nationalism. So, before delving into the aspect of nationalism, it is important to understand these three concepts: nation, nationalism, and national identity, because we interchangeably use these terms. In nationalism, national identity and nation are mostly used like synonyms. So, nation, nationalism, and national identity are intertwined but distinct concepts and complex terms due to their fluid and dynamic nature, which can take on different forms, variations in different political contexts. A nation can be defined as a large group of people with shared historical, cultural attributes, often residing within a territorial boundary. Now, as you can see, the term nation originates from Latin noun natio, which stems from Latin verb nasi, meaning to be born from. Thus, the definition of a nation entails a component of kinship, which connects an individual's root to its, paternal or maternal nativity. Collins Dictionary defines nation as an individual country considered together with its social and political structures also, people living in a particular country, to brief it. Now, nationalism, on the other hand, is a feeling and expression of pride in being part of a nation, as well as political construction that often strengthens the formation of national identity for individuals and groups. So Eugene Kamenka states that the concepts like nationalism express and act as ideologies. They hold together disparate and largely separable beliefs, attitudes, weld them into unity, often by reference to something outside themselves. For instance, we understand like a nation, like for example, a kid understand that he or she is Indian by understanding that they are not Chinese, they are not French, they are not Canadian. So it's a complete, as Derrida said, it's difference comparing with other words or other nations. We understand that we are us and they are them. Thus, nationalism fosters a sense of solidarity and collaboration among individuals, facilitating the achievement of national goals and realization of strategic national objectives. And many wrongly use the term nationalism as a synonym for nation. It is said by Stephen Grosby that we completely use nationalism as a synonym for nation. Nationalism refers to a set of beliefs about nation. Any particular nation will contain different views about its character. Thus, for any nation, there will be different competing beliefs about it that often manifest themselves as political differences. Some may view their nation as standing for individual liberty, while others may be willing to sacrifice that liberty for security. Some may welcome immigrants and support policies that make it easy for them to become citizens, while others may be hostile to immigration. Grosby provides the example of India in that book, a nation which is rich of history of diverse religious and cultural practices and a complex political landscape. He illustrates how political differences manifest in the context, stating that some members of nation have a narrow, intolerant view of their country by insisting that it should have only one religion, Hinduism, while others think that there should be freedom of religion, such as Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, rightly members of the nation. So this diversity of views, influenced by historical and political factors, is a common feature in many nations, where the views of majority of its citizens become ideals and shared values that forms crux of nationalism. Moreover, nationalism often asserts that other nations are implacable enemies to one's own nation. It injects hatred of what is perceived to be foreign, whether another nation, an immigrant, or a person who may practice another religion or speak different language. So this is exactly the one side of children's literature where they are promoting extreme nationalism by promoting jingoism or by cornering minorities. Even when we look at Indian contemporary works, we can just Google it and you'll see that most of the children's books I'm talking about contemporary publications after 2000 and all. You can see that the major characters, almost all major characters are either Hindu gods or from the dominant upper caste kind of characters. So what are the other religions, or what are the other minorities, or what are the other communities? They are completely invisible in contemporary Indian children's literature. Even when we look at Just Google it, and it's very evident. It is very evident. We don't need to do any kind of fieldwork or survey to prove this. Just look through the titles of contemporary Indian children's literature. It will be very, it's explicit, that kind of how they imbue, how the writers try to align with nationalistic expectations and all. So now let's move on to national identity. So on contrary, national identity is a subjective and psychological construct that describes how an individual connects with a nation, taking into account the commonalities and unique cultural features. The subjective nature of national identity and the degree of identification vary from individual to individual. National identity is a subjective sense of belonging to a nation through connection to its culture, tradition, history, and symbols. Thus, national identity is not mere racial or territorial or economical or political, it is also psychological. A nation is a psychological identification with larger community, and national identity is a sense of belonging an individual feels to that community. So, this is about nationalism. And now let's see what is nationalism in children's literature. What is this national narrative and all? Now, nationalism in children's literature refers to the ways stories for young readers promote ideas about the nation, its history, culture, values, heroes, borders, and collective identity. Now, these texts often teach children who belong to the nation and what the nation stands for and how they should feel about it. This who belongs to the nation is the central point of this entire argument. Now, children's literature plays a crucial role in shaping young readers' understanding both their own national identity and that of others. Now, when we look at particular children's books from India, we can see that there will be a hero and a villain. Now, hero is definitely, or heroine definitely belongs to upper caste. Mostly, I mean, 80% of that mostly belongs to this upper caste Hindu. You know, then who's a villain? Who's a villain though? Particularly in historical novels, mostly Chinese or. So what are they doing? I'm talking about this book, a mountain girl, Girls of India series. So in that blurb, it's written, it's clearly, evidently, it's written that now who is the villain? Is that a Chinese monk? It's written in the blurb itself, which means somehow this extreme nationalism is trying to creep into narratives for children, and parents or teachers uh, are unaware about this imbuing of nationalism because we overlook this entire genre or field. So Margaret Meek states that national identity, commonly regarded as a stylistic way of identifying differences between us and others, chiefly in terms of origins, optics, and association. And this reinforcement of national identity is very plain in all these, most of the texts. It is not explicit, but it's implied in each character. It's implied in plot. It's implied in each instances. Now let's see transnationalism. Now transnationalism as a theoretical perspective, it focuses on how people, goods, ideas, and cultural practices flow across borders. Uh, Transnationalism itself is not a new phenomena. It was already there, but as an academic discipline, it came into existence during 1990s. Now, it examines how cross-border interactions shape identities, societies, and economies. Now, transnationalism is defined as a process by which immigrants forge and sustain multi-stranded social relations that link together their societies of origins and settlement. Now, transnationalism is grounded in daily lives, activities, social relationships of migrants, which transcend the boundaries of nation in multiple ways. So, it's mainly about the question I always face when I talk about transnationalism is that what's the difference with diaspora? Now, both are related concepts. The diaspora and transnationalism are related concepts, but in diaspora, the focus is on culture, the culture, how the homeland and hostland culture is negotiated and all. But in transnationalism, the focus is mainly on mobility, locality, and hybrid identity, the in-betweenness. That's one difference. Now let's see the transnationalism in children's literature. So the concept of transnationalism, it refers to the social, cultural, economic, and political connections that extend beyond national boundaries, enabling individuals, texts, ideas to circulate across nations. In literary studies, transnationalism challenges the nation state as primary framework of analysis and instead focuses on cross-border flows of culture, language, and identity. In children's literature, transnationalism highlights how stories, themes, characters move across cultures, languages, and geopolitical contexts, reflecting global interconnectedness. Now, transnational children's literature refers to the texts that are produced, circulated, translated, and read across multiple nations and cultural context. Such literature often addresses the theme of migration, diaspora, hybridity, cultural exchange, and global citizenship. Scholars argue that children's texts increasingly reflect global influences due to international publishing markets, migration, and globalization of culture. Now, transnationalism also encompasses the lived experience of transnational subjects, children, and families who live in between cultures, and how these experiences are represented in narratives. So when we look at the historical development of transnational children's literature, it is, as I said, it's not a modern phenomenon. Earlier colonial and missionary texts circulated across empires, shaping ideas of childhood, morality, and identity. Philip Parry's in his work Centuries of Childhood states that some years before 18th century, we never had the concept of childhood. This concept of childhood was actually a product of this transnational connections and how the books were circulated, and he connects it to colonialism and all. For example, historical studies shows that children's books were transmitted across borders through religious, commercial, and educational networks from 18th to 19th century. For instance, when British went to Australia, they promoted this terra nullius concepts, right? But we really know that native aborigines were there, but they said it was terra nullius, no man's land. There was nobody there and all. And when they settled there, because it was a settler colony, it was a penal colony in the beginning, Australia. So when they settled there with family, of course they needed books for their children. So they made a British children's literature available there, which means kids of Australia, the first generation, exclusively read British children's literature. And they made it kind of mandatory for them to read that, because they wanted the next generation Australians to be British in attitude, in blood, and in ideals. So it's not a new kind of phenomenon. Now, globalization has intensified transnational circulation of children's books. International publishing houses, translation markets, and digital platforms allows text to reach global audience. Scholars argue that children's literature is increasingly influenced by international market forces and global cultural flows, which shape narrative themes, illustration, and ideological content. Multilingual initiatives such as global storybook projects also demonstrate how children's texts are created collaboratively across cultures and languages, reflecting national, transnational educational and literacy goals. We have a book collaboratively written by Christy Murray and Manjula Padmanabhan. It's like Eat the Sky and Drink the Ocean. So this is an example of transnational children's literature where two authors from different nations are collaborating. Murray is an Australian author and Manjula Padmanabhan is from India, and they both of them collaborated for this book. Now, among all these aspects, the most important one is migration, diaspora, and hybrid identity. And migration is the central core or crust of this entire transnationalism or transnational narrative. A major theme in transnational children's literature is migration and diaspora. Contemporary texts depict refugee experiences, migrant families, diasporic identities, highlighting cultural hybridity and in-between identities. So let me, I want to explain migration particularly because this is the linchpin aspect of transnational narrative. And next we have cultural representation, global citizenship, then translation and ideology. Now, cultural representation, we know that it's an era marked by migration, and it often promotes global citizenship, empathy, and intercultural understanding. Now, when it comes to translation, a translation plays a central role in transnational children's literature. Scholars argue that translated texts are not neutral but are shaped by ideological, political, and cultural factors. Translation and rewriting can manipulate narratives to align with local ideologies, educational policies, and moral values. Thus, transnational literature involves negotiation between source and target also. Now, migration, which is a linchpin aspect of transnational literature. So, this is not a very rigid division, but it's my observation also. So, in children's literature, we have narratives of migration. It can be divided into two categories: migrant literature and migration literature. Now, the emergence of migration as a pivotal interdisciplinary subject in social sciences and literary studies coincided with a juncture where the existing lexicon for describing contemporary nuances of migration became inadequate, because the already existing term was migration literature, I mean migrant literature, because migrant literature, it referred to the direct experiences of migrants, where the migrants from their personal experience would write narratives centering on migration and all. So this was the existing term here, migrant literature, but academia felt that migrant literature is inadequate to project other forms of experiences. So critics of the field contend that prior terminology describing immigrants no longer suffices, because migrants arrive in their new country of residence with practices and concepts formed at home, belonging to politicized populations and holding specific class affiliations, and subsequently engage in complex activities across nation borders that create, shape, potentially transform their identities. The existing theoretical and critical glossary's inadequacy in categorizing literature dealing with the notion of migration has become problematic. For example, in the literary domain, the term migration literature evolved as a necessary replacement for the existing term migrant literature. The term migrant literature was employed in a broad sense to encompass literary expressions of migrants, which manifest as memoirs, autobiographies, or fiction. However, academia has deemed the phrase inadequate in encompassing elements of migration-related writings. So due to the time limitation, I'll just brief it. So migration literature was a term introduced by Frank Soren and Sandra Blasta, because they thought that migration literature would be an umbrella term that can even encompass the imaginary migration literatures. In migrant literature, only the author who got the direct experience of migration can write, or their narratives only counted. But in migration literature, even imaginary migration literatures are other without any direct experience to migration, and their narratives can be included. Now, this is the different phases in transnational literature. The focus was on homeland and hostland beginning, then to the connections. Now it is in the archival turn where the focus is on specific diaspora. So this is exactly what is happening in the field of transnationalism. So currently in the archival turn phase, where the focus has kind of shifted from mobility and thus going to specific diasporas, their root, R-O-U-T-E, root and root, their mobility and locality. Now, what makes a children's book transnational? Now, a children's book is considered transnational when it deals with migration, diaspora, or cross-border identities. When it is written by a diasporic or multicultural authors, it's not mandatory that the author should be diasporic or multicultural. Circulates globally through languages or national contexts. Now, how these books show transnationalism? In their narrative, they demonstrate global circulation beyond national borders, child protagonists negotiating multiple identities, themes of migration, exile, cultural hybridity, hybrid genres, and multilingual and multicultural stories. Now, these are some of the texts The Arrival by Sean Tan. Now, I was focusing on the framework because once we understand the framework, it is very easy to apply the framework on different texts dealing with migration or hybrid identities. Most of the time, the framework is a problem when it comes to research. So it's important that we understand the framework. Then later we can apply the same framework into different texts. So these are some of the examples from contemporary children's literature. We have The Arrival, Inside Out and Back Again, Refugee, The Name Jar, Children of the Wind series by Kirsty Murray. Now, what's the relevance? Oh, as I already discussed, there is this critical oversight we often overlook, and this genre stigma where we assume that children books are very, what can I say, very simple and naive, and the scholarly imperative. There is this research gap in this entire field. So these are the reasons. Now, reframing children's literature in the era of transnationalism. So these are the substantiating points, the historical centrality of transnational narrative. So as we already discussed, it was used as a pedagogical instrument of the nation and a repository of national identity. So transnationalism is flipping this historical centrality. And so what are the drivers of this transnational turn? So why this shift is happening? There is a shift from national narrative to transnational narratives or transnational imaginaries. And why this shift is happening? It is happening due to several reasons, including globalization, mass migration, digital media, and transnational publishing conglomerates, international book fairs, international book awards, and several of these reasons altogether impact this transnational turn. So why this shift? This is the answer. Now, transnational imaginaries. When we look at these narratives, we see that there is this fluidity in representing geographies. Stories traverse borders, foregrounding journeys, encounters, and transformation, and layered identities. Protagonists navigate multiple cultural codes, acting as a translator between the worlds. So, for example, when we look at this work by Kirsty Murray, Children of the Wind series. So, Murray is an Australian author, but this entire series is based on the migration from Ireland to Australia. So this is a series, and in her final book, the major character, who is a 14-year-old girl, is of a mixed heritage. She is Irish, half Chinese, and Australian. And the story is about how she negotiates her identity and her transformation, and how she maintains her transnational networks with Ireland, China, and to Australia. So layered identities and narrative innovation is also there. There's fantasy, speculative fiction networks, and all mythologies from diverse traditions. All are incorporated in the narrative. Now, language and translation power is also an important area because translation is also a very quintessential aspect in transnationalism. Now, language occupies a central role in transition from national to transnational framework. Multilingual text, code switching, culturally embedded expressions challenge the dominance of monolingual norms. Translation, once invisible, now becomes a creative and political act, shaping how stories travel and how cultures are represented. Now, illustration and visual transnationalism, picture books and all, they are emerging like never. There is this rapid circulation, visual hybridity, and transcultural artifacts in this picture books, which makes the picture books like cherry on the top, because picture books are in forefront when it comes to transnational narratives. Now, reimagining belonging through stories. So we have the children see themselves shaped by histories, yet they are open to horizons beyond borders, and there is cosmopolitan awareness and shared futures for them. Now, to conclude, The movement from national narratives to transnational imaginaries should not be understood as a linear replacement but as a dynamic reconfiguration. National traditions continue to inform storytelling, providing depth and continuity. What changes is the framework within which these traditions operate, now open to dialogue, reinterpretation, and exchange. Looking ahead, children's literature is poised to further explore planetary perspectives, post-human themes, and digital storytelling environments. As young readers grow up in a world defined by connectivity and uncertainty, literature will remain a vital space for imagining coexistence, resilience, and shared futures. We recognize children's literature as a powerful medium through which concepts of belonging are negotiated and renewed. Transition from national narratives to transnational imaginaries reflect broader cultural transformations responding to the realities of a global age. By embracing multiplicity, fostering empathy, and sustaining narrative innovation, contemporary children's literature equips readers to navigate complex identities and interconnected worlds. So, in this evolving landscape, stories do more than entertain or instruct. They reimagine the contours of community, inviting children to see themselves as both rooted and relational, shaped by histories yet open to horizons beyond borders. Now, these are some of the references when it comes to the framework of transnationalism. We have Transnationalism by Stephen Wetterberg, Transnationalism, Nationalism, and Australian History by Anna Clark, which has a wonderful introduction to this framework. Now, Cartographies of Diaspora, Nations Unbound, Linda Bash, Diaspora and Transnationalism, Bobock and Feist. And in this work, Diaspora and Transnationalism, we can see several classifications of transnational subjects based on mobility and locality, the degree of mobility and locality. And we have Transnational Literature by Paul J. So thank you. I hope I didn't exceed the time limit. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shama, for that wonderful presentation. I think
Thank
I
you so
lost
much.
my connection in between. Am I
I kind
audible?
of rushed because,
Yeah, I could guess that because you had a time frame to follow.
yeah, I'm audible.
Anyway, it was beautiful, right?
Yeah,
So I think for those who were listening, it would have been
yeah,
an eye opener to a lot of things. So I think what she meant is we need to reframe children's literature. It means that we need to understand that stories are no longer contained within a singular cultural or linguistic territory.
yeah,
Because today we have books traveling across borders, which are
yeah,
translated in a wide manner, reaching diverse readership. So these kind of narratives actually increasingly, what I felt, what I've understood is portray characters who inhabit multicultural environments and who negotiate multiple
yes,
affiliations, encounter global challenges. There could be a lot of challenges. It could be
yes,
displacement, it could be migration, it could be climate change. So I think we also like this kind of reading or this shift also demands that we as educators and scholars, we take children's literature quite seriously as a site of ideological formation, right? We cannot
yeah,
dismiss it as simple. We cannot kind of push it to the fringes. It should be examined for how it constructs
yeah,
belonging, difference, ethical responsibility, and so on, right? So I think from Shama's talk, what
yes,
I've understood is when we read children's texts, we need to understand them as active participants in global conversations, right? So now I have one particular
yes,
question which I wanted to ask you. I think I can take the freedom to ask you the first
okay,
question.
ma'am.
I mean, I just wanted your view on this.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Do you think children can meaningfully engage with complex ideas such as diaspora, hybridity, global citizenship, which we're talking about? Or do these actually remain adult projections onto childhood? What is your take on that?
From my personal, I don't have any quantifiable data on that, but
Yeah.
from my
So just
personal
your
experience
viewpoint
during
would
my
be.
research time and all, it mainly, yeah, it mainly depends on the, uh, for instance, the reading capacity of, I don't know if it would be politically, um, I mean, incorrect to say this, but the reading capacity of Indian kids and Western kids when it comes to English literature is totally different. That's what I really felt, because the kind of literature a 14-year-old uh, kid reading in Canada or Australia is totally different from the kind of books being circulated here. That's one thing I really understood, because during my research, when I went through their middle grade texts, um, I even asked my supervisors, are kids reading this really? Are they digesting all this information? So this reading capacity is a bit different. Then I went on to blogs and other readers communities to really understand whether they are really reading these books, or it's just as adults projecting also. But I think they are reading. It's I think it's the difference in reading culture and all. And there is another thing, which is age appropriateness. I mean, for a 5-year-old kid, we can't tell them about the theories by Robin Cohen or uh, any such things, but we can make them understand, isn't it? Because I came across a book called A House for Everyone. That's a picture book, A House for Everyone. If I remember the name correctly, it's A House for Everyone. It's a picture book. It's about gender diversity. It's about gender diversity, and that book is for, I guess, 5 to 8 years old. It's a picture book, 5 to 6 years old or something. Um, and they beautifully projected this gender diversity in that picture book. It's also about the depiction, I think, how the author projects and all. So I thought, why this gender diversity book or books about non-binaries are for this 5 years old or 4 years old? But they beautifully constructed that book with the right pictures and the right kind of information. So it's the way the authors would construct the narrative and all. So we can't say adults are projecting all these ideas, and we can't underestimate kids also, like they won't understand all, because they are living this reality nowadays.
Yeah,
Migration
very.
is a part of their daily lives and all.
But when you were talking about reading
So I
culture, I
guess
was thinking about the culture, the
it's my
reading culture
personal
that,
opinion.
no, no, even I was thinking the reading culture, do you think it's declining nowadays? The habit of reading?
Declining. Actually, things are quite changing. We can't go back to bullet codes, and we can't force kids to stick on to print books. It's an age which is really transforming, as Harari said. Every generation arrives, everybody say this is the best generation or this is the worst generation.
Yeah.
We usually say ഏത് പുതിയ generation വരുമ്പോൾ we kind of say കലികാലം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ this is the best. But Harari recently, I mean, in his interview said that now this is really that generation which is going to bring a transformation, and he connects it with AI and all. But the fact is that reading culture is in a shift. They are reading, but they are reading micro-friendly things. That's what I felt. They
Very
are reading, but the digital micro reading kind of. That's what I felt.
absolutely true. What you're saying is absolutely right. I agree with you 100%. Now, the floor is open to the others who are listening to Shyama. If you have anything to clarify or just get her opinion on certain aspects, you're welcome to.
I do really
It is a
agree with
very interesting
Shyama when
topic.
uh, I hope I'm audible. I
Yes,
do
ma'am.
really agree with Dr.
Yes,
Shyama
ma'am.
when she says that the reading quality or the reading quantity, both the quality and the quantity of children here and outside are very different. Because they are the way
Different.
in which schools encourage reading. Even for the college students, I find that even in India, in
Yeah.
in many colleges, in many so-called well, good colleges, quote unquote good colleges, we find that children are encouraged to read this much books. But then the ordinary colleges
Yeah.
never think about this reading habit at all. So that part is a very important thing, and we have to improve this, because when we encourage students to read, only then will they read. That is one thing. My doubt here is uh,
Yeah.
it's about another thing. That is, do these contemporary children's literature do these contemporary works, do they talk back, or do they discourse with the earlier children's literary works? Like, for example, Enid Blyton or Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. Is there such a conversation going on
Uh,
in the contemporary literary tradition in children's literature?
mm, uh, Actually, when we look at the text, there are kind of references about this older works and all. But one thing I found from my experience of teaching is that Harry Potter is an old, very, very ancient text for the young kids. I mean, this is from my personal experience because I referred Harry Potter so that I can say examples. I can't say example from Kazan Sakas or because they are not really, they have no idea. So when I cite examples from Harry Potter or Narnia, they see these as ancient texts. That's one problem the teachers and authors are right now facing because for them it's very different kind of I mean media related literature, which is Stranger Things, the series. They are connecting more with series. So if we cite examples from series, they really understand. If we cite examples from Stranger Things, they are okay with that. From Dark, they can understand. From Lost, they can understand. But if I go to some books, they won't. And I was flabbergasted by one thing. I was teaching this one revisionist story, the Wolf Who Killed Pig, which is prescribed for degree students in the general papers, common paper. So it's a revisionistic tale of the already existing tale. The wolf who went to pigs and killed them. So I asked them in order to know whether they know folk tales, and I asked them, have you heard about the story of Undan and Undi, which is a very famous folk tale in Kerala? And most of them raised their hand and said no. So I was wondering, what are these guys actually, reading or hearing, or what kind of stories are they confronting? It's it's strange. At the same time, I accept that it's change. I mean, only constant thing in this world is change. So that's a problem. This going back to older text, Alice in Wonderland. I highly doubt how many of them really know Alice. They might know Elsa from Frozen. So that's the reality hitting you hard.
I think there
Yes.
are a few questions in the messages. I think I'll just read it out for you. Maybe one.
Message
Do we
box.
have time,
Okay.
ma'am? Till what time do we go on?
Okay.
Betsy, ma'am?
We can go on till 8:30, but it depends.
Okay. So I think there are two questions that have been posted. One is
Okay.
what role have
Okay.
digital media and transmedia storytelling played in expanding
Social media.
children's engagement with transnational cultural imaginaries? I think that it's there in the chat. What role have digital media?
Chat box. I saw it.
Yeah,
I saw
yeah.
it. Transmedia telling. Um, Actually, to be frank, it's beyond the scope of my research because my focus was on children's fiction, to be frank. But from my very limited exposure, there are plenty of, you know, um, animated, cartoons or anime movies dealing with this transcultural imaginaries and all. But uh, but again, I have to look more into it in a deep way because my research is just in the periphery of fiction and printed books and all. But it's there. Definitely, I have come across such works. I don't remember the names and all. The second question is, could growing exposure of children to multiple cultures through media and travel be reshaping how writers imagine their it should actually the writers should actually reconfigure their imagination. But again, as I said, we look at Indian children's literature, I highly doubt whether they are ready to accept this new generation audience, or are they really reconfiguring inside them to promote this transnational narratives? But of course, there are certain works, as I mentioned already in the PPT. There are some works which I appreciate for their effort and all. But again, when I look at Indian children's literature, this is one issue I found.
Shama, I would like to ask you something. Like today, we are talking about transnational children's
Okay.
literature. How, as teachers or as educators, how do we approach transnational children's literature in classrooms that are still structured around national curricula? Can we do anything about it?
It's actually a very problematic question
I mean,
because
I don't want to
when
ruffle any
we
feathers, but I don't
look
want to
at,
ruffle any feathers.
yeah,
I was just thinking of,
yeah,
I mean, if you can also kind of, if you don't want to answer that,
but
it's
actually when we look at, yeah, no issues. But as a person, I mean, as a teacher, I felt that sometimes when we teach them some kind of narratives, we have to reinforce that this country is our enemy. This is difficult for everyone, because in some contexts we somehow want to tell them, China is our, what they did to us, or what Pakistan did to us, or what Russia did to Ukraine, and authors are doing the same thing. They are somehow creating this rift knowingly or unknowingly, and there are a lot of studies which project this issue, particularly after 9/11 incident and all in America, how Islamophobia is very latent in children's literature after 9/11 incidents and all. So it's a pressing issue, and again, to deal with that, first of all, we should be very open-minded, which we not really are, because we too are very conditioned and influenced by the ideologies which were already injected into us, during our reading and all. So this openness and awareness about international issues is one thing we can work on, I guess.
thank you. Any
Shama,
questions? Does anyone have any question?
Shama, good evening.
Hello,
This
sir.
is not exactly a question,
Good
rather a
evening, sir.
compliment. Great to see you talking about
Okay, sir.
transnationalism. When even in Kerala, every institution of higher, I mean, when higher learning is competing to conduct seminars, probably only on IKs. Okay, so very,
Yeah,
welcome change, and congratulations for your bold statements, and thank you as well. Thank you.
thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Do we have any more questions? Anyone?
Shyama, can I ask a question?
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, goodness.
Hello.
Uh,
Good evening. No, two
Hello, sir.
things.
Good evening. Good evening.
You
Okay, sir.
referred to, good evening, Shyama. You referred to a child reading literature, a 5-year-old child or an 8-year-old
Uh,
child reading literature. But what happens is that very often, I know in some schools, they have reading periods. A period is set apart
yes.
exclusively for reading. Students are taken. We have it in schools, in Thrissur also. Very often what happens is that
Yes.
it is not the student who is reading, but the teacher who is reading and interpreting it.
Teacher.
Then don't you think that very often it is the personal perspective or the personal politics of the teacher creeping into the interpretation of those books? That's one question. Another question, it's not a question, these are not questions, just observations.
Okay.
What you said is right.
Yeah.
Many of our reading, the children's literature, many of our national books for children on children's literature are related to majority gods and all, majority faith gods and all. But remember, in our country, any attempt to silence minority viewpoint will be met with resistance. even if somebody tries to silence minority opinion, in such a situation, what might be the reason as to why children's literature is not often related to minority faith or beliefs? These are two doubts which crept into my mind. Now, first is not a doubt, second is a doubt when I listen to your talk. Can you
Yeah, I get
just
it.
elaborate on it?
Yes, yes, sir. Uh, the first question is uh, teacher's interpretation. Actually, Peter Hunt in his work, I guess the work, no, Nodal Perryman in the work Pleasures in Children's Literature, he says that children's literature is more like, it's like adults trying to conquer a colony. We are colonizing the minds of children. That's what we are doing in children's literature. The adults are the imperial, country trying to colonize the minds of children. So this is exactly what is happening in children's literature, because the name is very ironical. Children's literature, where children are very passive. They are just readers. They are not the producers. They are just passive consumers. Even when they are consumers, the power is not resting with them. It's the parents, teachers, librarians who choose books for them, isn't it? Even in school and college libraries, who are choosing books? It's teachers or it's librarians. So actually, what is children's literature? It's just adults trying to colonize minds of children. Interpretation is also one such technique, uh, to persuade them to think in a particular way. It is because of this marginal, they are kind of subaltern group. I should say that, isn't it? Children, they rest at the lowest block in power hierarchy, and we have the very right to impose anything upon them. So this interpretation, of course, I agree with you. So it's the, and in one way, author is also doing it. Author is also trying to impose their personal or national point of view to the reader, in a way underestimating them. And the second question, why no minorities? That question should be addressed in the context of India, I think, because when we look at Western tradition and all, we can see there are Aboriginal writings and all. Even when we look at Kerala, how many tribal authors are there? Even in adult, literature, how many tribal authors are represented? Very few, right? So when we look at children's literature, this this marginalization or marginalizing minority authors is, it's very prevalent from time immemorable onwards, right? So why? Maybe this one reason I could see is that this projecting of uh, gods and deities has a huge market in international book markets, where they are celebrating and eulogizing this Hindu culture and all. It got a huge market abroad. That's one reason I feel this particular subfield is emerging. I guess so. Because once we go out from our country, then we stick on to these rituals and traditions are very important for them to feel rooted. And we can see these several shameful incidents in news also, right? They polluting the river and doing this idol worship and everything in other countries. So one thing is market. I believe so. I believe so. I don't have any quantifiable data. It's my personal opinion or viewpoint. Thank you for the question, sir.
Do we have any more questions, or shall we call it a day or night, whatever you would like to say? But Shama, it was really, it was an eye opener, very interesting, and it's like something that we've not usually heard. So it was very invigorating to listen to you. And you are a very dynamic and vibrant personality. I really enjoyed listening to you. So thank you so much. And I think
Yeah.
if that is it, I
Thank you
can
so much.
hand over to Nima.
Thank you, ma'am.
So thank you to Professor Dr. Betsy Paul and Dr. Nisha Tamji Varghese and organizing committee behind Chrysalis. Thank you so much. And thank you to the wonderful audience and to the wonderful questions.
Thank you, ma'am. So for the audience, there is a feedback link posted in the chat box. So please submit it to generate your e-certificates. So coming to the end, I take this opportunity to express my heartfelt gratitude and appreciation to all those who have contributed to making this online lecture series, Chrysalis, a remarkable success. First and foremost, I would like to extend my deepest thanks to our presenter, Dr. Shyama Shashindran, and our moderator, Dr. Nisha ma'am, for their valuable presence. Then I would like to thank our principal, Dr. Dias ED, our former principal, Professor Chaco Josby, for his continuous support, and Professor Betsy Palsy, Director of Research, whose generosity and partnership had played an integral role in bringing this event to a life. And Ms. Susan Joshi, HOD, Research and PG Department of English, for her valuable support. A special thank to all our attendees for being here today. Your presence and enthusiasm have made this gathering all the more meaningful. We truly appreciate your time and participation. So, as we draw this event to a close, let us carry forward the knowledge, connection, and inspiration we have gained here today. Once again, on behalf of St. Aloysius and Chrysalis team, I thank everyone for your valuable time and cooperation in this session. So, see you in the next session. Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you so much.
So one more evening well spent, and it was really so
True.
insightful and actually
Thank
enlightening,
you.
and we feel we felt so relaxed. And
You've
thank
got
you
a
so
very
much,
contagious
Shama.
energy,
And
Shama. It's very contagious, you know.
yeah,
Very positive.
the way that
Thank you
you
so much.
brought in that excitement into
So I
knowledge.
think that
And Nisha too, you too
Thank you.
brought in all the nuances around. And uh, Professor Nandakumar, thank you so much for your question and for your active encouragement.
thank you, Betsy ma'am, for inviting me. It was really nice. Looking forward to more such sessions.
Thank you for accepting the
My
invitation,
honor,
both
my
of you.
pleasure.
And thank you
Thank
for
you.
all the questioners. Jason is there, and okay, all the others are there. And I
Yeah.
hope you got introduced to our research scholars, Nima, Hridya, and Shruti.
Nice meeting
They're
all of
here.
you. I think I only saw Nima.
Okay.
Nima is the only person we get to see on
Actually,
screen.
yeah,
Yeah.
because anchor gets
We are
screen
all
the
attention.
screen space.
So this is back to the kind of the era of the COVID online classes, no? This webinar, it is,
Yeah,
I think, giving me memories of those days. I used to hate
yeah.
online classes.
But then this is a good platform that has helped us a lot,
True,
because
true.
otherwise it would be very difficult for us to come together like this.
True, very
Now,
true.
here there were
Yeah,
so
yeah.
many people from all around India,
True.
and we could sit at the comfort
They
of our
all can
home and
participate
talk
and
about these serious things.
yeah.
So, thanks a lot once more
Thank you
to the
once again.
presenter, to the moderator, to the
Thank you, ma'am.
organizers,
Thank you
and
so
all the
much for the
participants
opportunity.
here.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night. Bye bye.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.